Peace. How are you?
I'm great. Kylie, I'd love to start today by hearing a bit more about you and what you do.
Sure. So my name's Kylie-Lee Bradford. I'm a proud Moderator woman from Kakadu National Park. I grew up in a small Aboriginal community back home, so I had a fantastic cultural upbringing, which is awesome. And I'm the founder of Kakadu Tiny Tots. So we produce baby clothing, organic baby clothing, with our hand-painted art and Dreamtime stories, along with Mums and Bubs wellbeing products.
Beautiful. It's wonderful to have you here, Kylie.
Thank you.
I'd now love to introduce Jennifer Nielsen of Echo World. Jennifer, please join us.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you, Peace.
Hi, Jennifer. I'd love to hear more about you and what you do. Give us a bit of an intro.
Well, I am an ex-corporate who jumped ship to the Save the Planet space, and I have a business called Echo World, which is actually the biggest eco community in Australia. And we've developed recently a piece of tech called Echo Score that measures the eco-ness of products. And essentially, it's designed to give people as much or as little information about how a product is really made, and allow them to either take it at face value or investigate as much as they like, and eliminate greenwashing.
That's fantastic. I'm really looking forward to exploring that more in our conversation today, and the work that you're doing. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. I'd also like to introduce Rinku Razdan of Connections.
Hi, Peace. How are you going?
I'm good, Rinku. How are you?
I'm really, really well. Pleasure to be here.
It's wonderful to have you here. I'd love you to tell us a bit about you and about the Connections app that you've developed.
Yeah, so I am the founder and CEO of a technology platform called Connections, which is a one-stop multilingual platform for anyone who is moving to a new city or a new country. And it instantly connects you to all things you need to settle into that new city or new country. Things like jobs, things like events, things like settlement information, Medicare, all the things that you just don't know moving to a new country. It accelerates your settlement. It's very, very personal to me because I am a first-generation migrant, and therefore it's really, really a passion-driven project for myself. I'm also a technology consultant, so I use that IP or professional IP of technology consultant combined with my personal IP of being a migrant to drive Connections as a social innovation.
It's amazing. Rinku. I'd now love to introduce our New Zealand representative, Jannat Maqbool. Jannat, how are you?
I'm good. Hey, hi, Peace and everybody else. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today.
It's wonderful to have you here, Jannat. And I'd love to start today by hearing a bit about you and the work that you're doing.
So I'm actually Australian originally. So sort of that New Zealand representative might be a bit, but so I'm from Punjabi descent, which is North Indian, and my grandfather migrated to Australia in the mid 1890s. So I've been born and raised in Australia and living here for a while. I'm a qualified accountant, but really quickly with the Y2K bug moved into the tech side of accounting and finance, and did a bit there, saw the potential of technology, and then moved like Jennifer to a different side of the world in terms of the ability for tech to make a difference. And so currently I have a number of roles, but the main one that I think I'll talk about today is as the Director New Zealand for the Smart Cities Council Australia New Zealand.
Yeah, fantastic. And you are Australian, but you've been living in New Zealand for a long time now.
Yeah, since 2001. So I moved over here then. And we come back every year, except probably this year, for a holiday. So, but I'm definitely Australian.
Yes. Fantastic. So I'd love now to just really get into the conversation and hear about how what you're doing is changing the world. So I'd love to start with you, Kylie. I know you're passionate about preserving Indigenous culture, inspiring the Indigenous community, and inclusion for Indigenous people. I'd love to hear about a bit more about how you're doing that, how you're changing the world and creating brighter futures for Indigenous people through the work you're doing.
Yeah, sure, Peace. So through my own growth and developing my company, I soon realised that there was so many young Indigenous entrepreneurs out there, especially in the women, in the women's space. And that's where I'm mostly passionate about. You know, I'm a mum of four. I've got 3 daughters, 1 son, and they're all very excited to, you know, go back bush and start weaving and doing all their beautiful things that they do. And I sort of started just, you know, mentoring 1 or 2 young girls, and it just ended up being such a passion of mine. Now I've got about 30 women that I mentor to help grow their micro and startup businesses. We've built a platform where they can utilise our products as well and our services to be able to grow their own businesses. And what we try to do is especially the rural, the ones that are out in communities, they're the ones that don't want to leave community just because they feel like, you know, the big city, you know, and I need to be there. That's not the case at all. We're trying to build more sustainability in our Indigenous communities. So the mums do have a revenue stream and they don't have to leave anywhere. They can do it in their own backyard. So we've been having many conversations with different holders and stakeholders to be able to supply the NBN and the network so that, you know, they don't have to go anywhere. We're there and they can utilise their own country to build their businesses.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's so important for Indigenous women to be able to be, you know, earning an income, but also be able to use the technology to be able to stay on country. Why is that so important?
Oh, it's extremely important because it keeps our kids on country as well. So they're constantly learning as, you know, as they're growing. Taking them away from country can sometimes end up in all sorts of issues. And it's so important to preserve our culture. And, you know, 99% of the time the kids don't want to leave. They don't want to even go to high school in the city. So, you know, it's a way that we can develop that, and they don't have to run away unless they want to big cities and pursue a career. They can do stuff in their own backyard, and it's incredible the amount of businesses we have up and running now in Waikato. Yes, it's been a little bit of a hold over COVID, but put it on your bucket list to come home and you'd meet some really incredible young entrepreneurs back home.
Yeah, that's fantastic. The mentoring that you're doing, Kylie, I'm assuming it's all via Zoom, but do you also go back on country and meet with them face to face as well, like normally?
Yeah, 100%. So I'm home. I am living in Brisbane currently, but I'm home every 2 months normally. For me, I go on cultural reasons as well. There's a lot of healing that we can do at home. My kids go through ceremonial practices through certain times of their lives as well, which is really important. So I often go home for about 4 weeks at a time. When I say home, it's a small Aboriginal community in the bush. It's like nearly 100 k's from your closest shop. So there is a beautiful, you know, clarity around us, and we can really strengthen what we're learning. And my kids, you know the bush like the back of their hand. So yeah, it's really important that we keep that strong and going.
That's really beautiful. Thank you. Jennifer, I'd love to move to you now and hear about how you're changing the world through what you're doing with your tech platform.
Thanks, Peace. Is it okay if I ask Kylie something or just add something to what Kylie said? It relates a lot to what we're about. So one of the big things about Echo Score is it allows people to focus on what's important to them. So the score itself is made up of 10 societal and environmental standards. And one of them is, of course, place of origin. Ultimately, Echo Score is going to be a global thing, but right now it's an Australian POC or proof of concept. And one of the things that I think it's so cool to be on this meet with you, Kylie, because I think one of the big things I've learned, I learn something every day, which I swear is half the reason I'm doing this, is that when we get to place of origin, of course, originally I was interested in, was it made in Australia? Then I realised, shit, we better, don't let me swear, I'm such a bad swearer. Like a trooper. It got me to realise that actually local, of course, is better than Australia. And then Indigenous, a lot of the Indigenous stuff started to come through, and I started to understand, and I'm sure I'm a long way from understanding. I grew up in outback Queensland in the Northern Territory, near a lot of Indigenous communities, so I've got a bit of a heart for it. But what I didn't understand was the incredible work that a lot of women in particular are doing, Indigenous women are doing. And it's not just the wisdom, is it? It's the fruits, the vegetables, the native, all the native Indigenous, plants and things that are being brought back.
Yeah.
And it's not just, it's healing for everyone, more than I think a lot of people realise.
Yeah, definitely, Jennifer. I've noticed even on my journey, we do a lot of pop-up native food talks. So for example, what we do is we take a small group from our Aboriginal community, we take them through a walk through the bush down to the back billabong. Through that walk, we're able to showcase, like you said, our fruits and our foods. Then they'll go to the back billabong and be able to get water mussels and stuff. And then by the end of it, we sit and do a cook-up and show basically exactly how we'd cook at home. And it's not just that we're showing off what we have, it's so educational because, for one, a lot of the tourists would never be allowed into an Aboriginal community to see the way that we live back home. So that's number one, which really does highlight. I had some tourists come through from Germany and they were like, how do you live like this? This is like a third world country, but it's normal. This is normal. And putting, if you put a brick home there for a Metricon, for example, that would be really, really not normal for us. So it's education all around the board. And the more we can educate people, especially in our native foods, I use a lot of kakadu plum in my skincare and things like that. It's got the highest source of vitamin C in the world. And it's exactly what we feed our kids when they've got any sort of, belly issues, headaches, things like that. So yeah, it's a world that you want to dig into because we've got some incredible stuff that, we can educate the world on.
Yeah, and actually is one of the, it seems to be one of the better known Indigenous foods around the country at the moment. But I see it creeping into a lot of beauty products and food products and superfoods, supplements, etc. But yeah, so I guess from that perspective, this is a great example of what EcoScore does. So essentially, we take the 10 environmental and societal factors, roll them up into a score, but then we score each one. So, for instance, place of origin is a score in its own right. Chemicals like organic, toxin-free, pesticide-free, etc., etc. Then there's no exploitation, which of course takes into account things like slavery, child exploitation, and any vegans as well. Actually, veganism is under no exploitation because that's seen as exploiting animals. So that's essentially there's 10 of those. And one of the reasons that I thought it was so important, and it took 8 years, by the way, to get to a point where we even thought to develop this. And through those 8 years, I mean, I'm a typical ex-corporate who is used to being in charge. And, you make an announcement and everyone says, oh, that's fabulous, and they all turn up. So when I started Eco World, of course, I expected that was going to happen, and of course it didn't. Because 8 years ago, no one was really that interested in the whole eco thing anyway, to be honest.
No.
So as time went by, I kind of learned that not everyone was fascinated by everything I said, and also people became more and more interested in this space, and the space has grown to the point where something like EcoScore would never have even been possible more than 2 or 3 years ago, I would say. So what's happened is as the space has developed, people are much more likely to declare whether something is local or vegan or organic or etc. The problem, of course, is that's fine, except invariably there are things missing. So something, for instance, could be, I was looking at something this morning, a toilet paper. And it's a great thing, and every time, every one of these rolls that's sold plants a tree, it's made of bamboo, all this fantastic stuff. And I'm reading through this and I'm thinking, it's not made in Australia. Now, the thing is, most toilet paper is not made in Australia, but my point is they were going to great pains to avoid saying it wasn't made in Australia. And I'm not meaning to pick on this particular toilet paper company, but it illustrates the point of what happens a lot with a lot of products, even the best intentioned ones. They tell you the good stuff and leave out the stuff that they don't, so much want to hear. So I've learned over time that actually good eco businesses tell you everything. And that's how I discovered that what greenwashing really is, whether it's an eco product or a non-eco product. So essentially, we built an algorithm. We have spent quite a bit of time working with RMIT Uni in Melbourne. We built an algorithm that weights these different categories, and ultimately it's being fed by machine learning, because you can get quite deep into this conversation, and it'll be automated. So we will get to the point where we can score anything, whether invited or not, because the data from any product that exists can be found somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's it in an essence, in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing.
It is really amazing, and that will eliminate a lot of the fake products out there that are just promoting, for example, Kakadu plum, and they're just putting it on their label, and they might have 0.5% of some reduced oil that they've formulated. So that's an incredible app to have that you're creating.
One of the other things with it too, that raises a really good point. It's making these fake claims. Like there's a well-known home fragrance company that I just die every time I see one of their TVCs on, prime time television. Not that anyone watches television anymore, I suppose, but essentially one of the well-known ones has just put out a new line called Botanical something, and there's all this rubbish about how it mimics nature, and I just think, and you just know it's just pushing poison, into people's lounge rooms. So yeah, it's important to expose that kind of thing really quickly.
Yeah, and by exposing that, by telling people what's really going on, it has been shown to create change, and those brands have then gone, oh, we're sorry, we're now putting these measures in place. So sometimes you are seeing that really positive action after they've been called out. Fortunately, we've got to wait until they've been called out. But it is
something. Thank you, Peace. That's actually one of the big points of it, because there's two factors. Big organisations use small companies as their outsourced R&D more and more. So essentially, a lot of it, Unilever has bought so many little green companies, and you've got to be happy about that. I mean, I know some people aren't, but in reality, a lot of those businesses now use these small businesses as their outsourced R&D. They wait for them to get to a certain size, then they acquire them, and they do use them to inform practices, because in the end, I'll tell you, Unilever have the best eco research data on the planet, bar none. And I'm no particular fan of them any more than anyone else, but what they've done is they've realised the mood, the consumer mood, and they're shifting with it. So they know people are moving in this direction, so you might as well get ahead of the game. And if you want to win the retail game, then get there first. So, and I guess that's one of the big things about EcoScore is it's a real point of purchase thing, because I figure we can't stop big money making people consume, but if you can get to them at the point when they're consuming, then you can get them to make better choices. And if you can influence choices, you influence the supply chain, which is your point. And if COVID-19 has taught us nothing, we know that everyone counts. So, every time you purchase something different, you make a difference.
And the other thing it's taught us is that we're all connected. So we are connected, and the things that we do, the choices we make, the things that we buy do have an impact that can be felt globally.
Yeah.
So for us to be making those better choices, and if all of us were thinking about things like where things were made, what was in them, who made it, are they being paid fairly? If we were all thinking about those things, we could make a difference and create a better world.
Yes.
We've got some background noise. I'm not sure whose it is, but if you're not speaking, if you could go into mute, that would be great. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Jannat. And Jannat, I'd love to hear about how the work you're doing with smart cities is making a difference and changing the world. Jannat, you're on mute.
Having some problems with the technology at this end. I was trying to adjust it as well because I was getting some feedback and I thought it might have been at my end. But anyway, so yeah, so I do a number of things. One of them, which is around smart cities at about 3 different roles, maybe 4. I lost count. But as Smart Cities Council, so Smart Cities Council is a global organisation started back in 2012. It's got representation now in North America, India, Europe, obviously Australia, New Zealand, and then Southeast Asia. So our focus is basically to inform, educate, convene, and advocate for advocate for smart cities and support smart cities initiatives. But the important thing is that we align what we do with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So my role as director only started in New Zealand. So Director New Zealand started in January. So the first thing that we did quite soon after and before COVID actually was because in another role I'm involved in some regional tech initiatives, and so I was running a huge festival called Tech Fest 2020, and so we had as Smart Cities Council, we co-hosted with Hamilton City Council an event just before, so as a pre-event, and the idea was to bring together technology sector, the demand side of smart cities in terms of councils and community, and then academics, and the whole event was focused on Sustainable Development Goal 11, and it was looking at what were the opportunities and challenges for New Zealand in establishing smart cities initiatives that aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, and specifically number 11. So 11 looks at making cities, and so it's gone through about 2 or 3 iterations of what its title is, but basically we're looking at how cities and human settlements can be more inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. So all of our work, so we've got the Smart Cities Council's got a number of initiatives. We've got an event series that runs every year. We've got the Smart Cities Readiness Guide, then we've got the challenge, and this is all quite a lot of activity in Australia at the moment, and obviously globally, less so in New Zealand until sort of with my role starting here. But the important thing, I think, is the timeliness, I reckon. So the SDGs have been there since about 2015, I think, maybe. But what COVID has shown us, and so there was a pause there, and so then there was COVID, and we've come out the other side of COVID with an initiative called Bounce Lab to support economic recovery. So we've just had a session today with that, and so what we've basically done is gone out to, again, the academic space, so academia, and then the tech sector, and then councils across Australia and New Zealand, and posed the question around how can technology and data support economic recovery. So we had a session on that today. So I'm sort of that's what I'm involved in, and I think the key part there is the sustainability one. So if you look at all the different sort of places where you can find what sustainability means, and we've just talked about some of them here from a few different perspectives. From the perspective of smart cities, it's around everything to do with economic viability, the environment, and obviously social. And in terms of the social aspect, it's community well-being, but it's also equity. And I think people sort of, and we've seen that a lot with, I don't know about in Australia, but in New Zealand, the digital divide has become even more prominent now through COVID. So it's very much around. So even with things as simple as an app that the government's released, and I know you have one over there, it's not, I mean, you'll see the media, it's not accessible for people that are visually impaired, and it's not accessible for communities and people that don't have a phone or a phone that you can download an app on. And even if they had the phone and the app and they had an internet connection, they wouldn't know what to do with it, you know, like, so there's the digital literacy component. So I'm quite happy, quite chuffed actually, that the Smart Cities Council looks at all those factors, and it isn't just about the technology side. And I think that's why I'm involved, and I think that's what sets the Smart Cities Council apart, and that's why I quite like being part of it. But the other side of it is data. So we've obviously seen the noise around the app and the concerns probably in Australia just as much as in New Zealand around all the data being captured and data privacy. And we've also got this for our Indigenous people here, so this concept of Māori data sovereignty, and what does that mean from an Indigenous perspective? And so data so tech and data to support economic recovery, but in terms of smart cities, the data conversation, I think, is quite a fundamental one. And so the Smart Cities Council has also got this Centre for Data Leadership that we've launched. And the purpose, so the things that we're sort of covering, or the key sort of elements of that, are to look at purpose, privacy, security, ethics, and then governance of data. So I'll potentially talk about some of these a little bit later. But so that sort of, I think, summarizes what I'm involved with in terms of smart cities and what we're doing to change the world, is that focus on the Sustainable Development Goals, but actually what sustainability really means from its different perspectives, and for economic development as much as for community well-being.
That's fascinating. It really is. I think you're doing so much, and I'm really curious about the levels of people that you're working with. So you're working with academia and the research kind of field and community, and government. So I'm assuming like local, state and federal government, and then the community as well.
Yeah. So yeah, and then the tech sector. So I often stand up on stages and speak, and I just said it actually the other day. I was on another event, and it was about digital twins, and I said that the conversation has to be led from the demand side around what a digital twin is. So that's like a replication of the physical world digitally, but actually lots of people think it's just about visualizing data, but it's not. It's about actually what does that then enable you to do to run scenarios for in the real world digitally, and then be able to push things back to make stuff happen in the physical world. So a true digital twin. But anyway, I was on Infrastructure New Zealand event, and I said that before we move on it, we shouldn't be led by the tech sector. We should be led by the demand side. And then I said in there also, co-created with community. So you have to have that co-creation with community. And I'm quite lucky that I'm involved with a council that's leading in that space. So when I'm not the Smart Cities Council Australia New Zealand director for New Zealand, I'm also the Smart Cities advisor at Hamilton City Council, which is the fastest growing city in the country in New Zealand. And so we've taken a smart society approach, and it's very much about what does smart mean for a society, and all that sort of word defines, like what is a society and what does that mean, but what does smart mean in that context. And so it's very much not about the technology, but it's about that evidence-based, so making decisions that's evidence-based, that involves co-creation with the stakeholders and the community, involving everyone, the inclusion, and also around research. So as much as that evidence base is there, is actually what new knowledge can we create. So that was really interesting. So the tech sector's there, and academia is there, and the council's there wanting to be more efficient. And there's that whole difference between what is a smart city, smart society, and is it a smart council. So often what you'll see in the smart city space is a council being smart. So the council's gone digital, the council's offering services differently, the council's being smart about how they're managing their operations and their asset infrastructure, how they're doing what they do for us in terms of picking up rubbishes and managing that infrastructure, traffic flow, and all that sort of thing. But the smart city is the next one, but the smart society one is the interesting one, and that's where I think it's really important that you do have those three parts of that conversation. So the academia, the technology, but they're quite interesting to have in a room together. It was definitely interesting.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, incredible work that you're doing. I've heard about smart cities, and I kind of had the idea that it was about working with government and sustainability and community, but I never really understood how it all worked together. And yeah, it sounds really, really interesting. Really cool. Yeah, thank you. So Rinku, I'd love to move to you now, and somebody who is passionate about community and inclusion and making people feel welcome. So would you tell us about how you're changing the world through the work you're doing?
Yeah, look, I'm really, really blessed that something that started as a passion has now grown to the extent that it has grown. And it is all credit to the community that I work in. One of the things that I'm really, really proud to say about Connections is it is a platform for the migrants, by the migrants. And I absolutely love saying that because it's a space that we really understand. It's a space that we really want to solve. And it's a space that requires a lot of inclusion to be driven. The whole motto of the organization is not diversity, it is actually inclusion. And that includes all types of Australians. And the term that we have coined for primarily migrants and refugees, the term that we have coined is New Australians. Because as far as we are concerned, they're just a +1 to that country. So therefore, we refer to them as New Australians. So, I mean, I have a personal journey where I basically started with nothing in a country with just $20 and hardly any English and all those sort of things. And it was a really, really difficult settlement period. And I'm really blessed that, I live in a community, I live in a country where I was supported to the extent where I have become quite successful in a corporate world. But I always had this inclining feeling of just giving back to the community that has given so much to me in turning my life around. So initially, I was basically just doing community engagement, exactly to what Jannat was saying, which is, reaching out to the community, trying to understand if there are more people who had settlement challenges, or did I just get hit by the bad stick here? I went out and I broke bread with, Vietnamese, Filipino, Lebanese, Scottish, Irish, you name a community. We were out there mingling and trying to understand, trying to collect data on how big is this problem. And we got to a point where we had enough data points. And because I'm a data nerd, obviously, I'm going to look at all the data points. So we got to a point where we had enough data points where we went, okay, there's a problem. There's actually a massive problem. And what was worse was no one knew how big this problem was. There wasn't enough awareness around this problem, which was even worse. So we then decided, initially I just opened up like a website saying, this is what we are planning to do. And right from the beginning, I was very open and transparent about my idea, where I'm going with this. So I just opened up a website saying, I'm planning to create a one-stop platform for anyone who moves to a new country. These are my early sketches, plans. I'm thinking technology is the way to go because we can scale it very quickly. What do you think? I was just inundated by response, inundated. Like I more than 10,000 people responded. And all the response was, one, yay, please do that. And two, how can we help you? Which was amazing. I mean, I had all these people who have great skills. They have tech skills, they have graphic skills, they have content generation skills, they have community liaison skills. They volunteered to basically work with me to create this. And here we are. We have launched not just Australia's world's first one-stop multilingual platform, which uses data, APIs, and algorithm to instantly connect you to anything you need to settle into a new country. And it's a complete credit to the community that I work with because it's a 100% volunteer-run organization. Really proud.
That's amazing. And I love that the communities all come together to support and to build it. I think there's something powerful about that it's built by the community for the community.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Really, really proud. And, you know, it's something, and because it's a technology asset, we constantly improve it. So and again, for an organization that is 100% volunteer run, excuse my language, we are kicking ass. You know, in 2 years, not only we have released various beta versions of the product, we have actually released a product into the market. The product is now ready for scale. We have partnerships with large organizations. We have revenue coming in. It's a not-for-profit, so it goes back into the organization. You know, we are now seen as the leading game changer, who really understand the space of new Australians. We really understand that, and we are now collaborating to go to the next step, which is basically trying to create first-generation entrepreneurs. Because we have learnings to be able to do that. So we are going to the next step. I'll explain a little bit about the product, how it works, because it sort of all then sinks in. It sort of makes sense. So we've got 3 offerings on our product. They're called Life, Career, and Community. Under Life, we provide you with all interactive settlement content. In any language you want. So content like, you know, how to get your Medicare card, how to get a TFN, how to get ABN, blah, blah, how to register for superannuation, all information that you need when you're ready for something. You know, no one sits on the couch and says, oh, today I'm going to read about superannuation. It just doesn't happen. You will only need that information when you're about to apply for a job or you have a prospect of a job. So what Life does, it gives you relevance of content at a point in time when you need it through a mobile app. The second one is Careers. Careers is very algorithm driven. So one of the problems that new Australians face is getting the right job for the right skills they bring into this country. I mean, in my personal case, it took me over 15 years to get the job that I was qualified for. So through Careers, what we do is you put a little bit of information about yourself. I am Rinku. I don't have a car, can only travel 20 Ks. These are my skills and qualifications. I can only work on Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays because of my personal commitments. And by the way, I've got vast amount of international experience in this. And based upon that, we directly match you to the jobs, directly to the employer jobs. We provide the service completely free, absolutely free, because our motto is to create more and more jobs for people of international background. So to drive that inclusion, we make it absolutely free proposition. Therefore, money is not an option there. The third service we provide is community. So if you look at our community tab and you pick any community, let's say you're looking at integrating with Chinese community. So you pick Chinese, it works like a heat map. It will tell you where all the Chinese people are within Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. And then it goes next stage where it will also tell you all the upcoming events in that area. Now, unfortunately, at the moment, there are no events. But when there were, you would get matched to those events as well. Your nearest service, you know, your nearest hospital, your nearest aged care, your nearest school. And soon we are looking at introducing your nearest accommodation. If you want to live within your community, or in some cases away from your community, you still have that choice too. So if you put the 3 propositions together, which is Life, Career, and Community, it is Australia's first new Australian onboarding platform in a language that you are comfortable in.
That's fantastic. It really is.
Thank you.
And, I know you're in Sydney. Is the app restricted to New South Wales or Sydney, or can new Australians in other parts of Australia access it as well?
You can access it around the world. So we actually initially only opened it in Australia, but then we started getting all these messages from people around the world saying, we are looking at moving to Australia. Can we please access your app? So now what people are doing is they're gathering information about Australia before they move to Australia. So it's actually getting them ready for settlement even before they arrive into Australia, which is just, I think, nirvana from my point of view.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Thank you.
Really would be helping to prepare them for that transition to make it easier.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so because we are in that space of where we want to be known as New Australian ambassadors. That's what we are. We know this space. We have all sorts of analytics built on the platform. So we've got incredible amount of data. We know which community wants what information. So if you want, information on communities or what sort of job skills they bring to the country and all the sort, we have all of that. But so because we stand and we really understand that New Australian space, one of the things that we noticed is, and we are constantly taking a data-driven approach, we noticed that people who were getting matched to jobs, fantastic, they were getting placed and they were happy. But then people who were not getting matched to jobs, or they were getting matched to jobs and they were not accepting the jobs, we then contacted them and we sort of asked, okay, well, we're not understanding this space, help us. That's when they said, we want to become entrepreneurs. That's what we want to do. We want to become entrepreneurs, but we don't have networking skills. We are new in this country, so we don't know how to go about it. So that just logically brought the next service into our rim, which was, okay, we are already matching them to jobs. Let's start Australia's first generation entrepreneur program. So we are now in the process of working with Department of Innovation and Science to set that up as the next stage of helping New Australians.
Fantastic. So good. So now I'd love to ask each of you about, what's next in the work that you're doing in each of your spaces. But before we go into that, Kylie, I'd love to have a chat with you about a couple of years ago when you appeared on Shark Tank and you were offered investment. Could you fill us in on that story and what happened and how that and the experience?
Well, it was obviously for a startup, it was an incredible experience. They flew my mum down from the bush, first time in Sydney, so she was stoked. And yeah, we couldn't believe that we were even on the show, to be honest. I was only 12 months into my company, just started my business, had my first sample range, and all my data and all my research of what customer I wanted to go at. And then I thought it was a great idea to go and do this Shark Tank business. So anyway, we went onto the show, and we did get an offer from Steve Baxter and John McGrath at this super early stage. And at the time, we were really excited, thinking, this is going to be amazing. We're going to be able to scale very quickly. But then through discussions, we soon realised that these were definitely the wrong investors for us. With all that we do for our community, we really needed to align our vision and mission if we did take on an investor. And it was my first big learning of, when you take on an investor, to really make sure they are the correct investor and they're doing what needs to be done within your company to give back with your vision and mission. And we ended up turning down those investors and went at it alone, which is probably the best decision we ever made. But at the time, it was very exciting, especially for a young startup in the Indigenous space where no one even, like Jennifer was saying, organic, vegan, what do you mean? No one's talking about that stuff. So yes, it was exciting, but a credible learning curve as well.
I think the action of you doing that, of actually saying to them, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to compromise on paying the Indigenous artists who've done this work. I'm not going to compromise on the quality of my products. I think it says a lot about you and your values and what you stand for and the vision that you have for what you're doing at a bigger scale at the community, what you're doing for your community through your work. Really good.
Yeah, I think you have to have that voice too piece. I mean, so many artists in our industry are not recognised and they're not paid correctly. And, this is where you need to really be that front runner and go, no, come and work with us. This is what we're doing. We're doing good. We want people from community. That's what we want to give back to. So it all has to align. And stop steering off. You can always steer off in different directions, but just stay with that focus, and it'll all work out.
Yeah, beautiful. So I'd love to hear about what's next for you with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so we're always looking at new ways. I think that's an entrepreneurial curse sometimes. You know, we go a bit too fast for the way things are going in the world. But I think definitely our next phase is to make the mentoring more accessible online. You do have Zoom and things like that, but what I'd really love to create is to be able to match make women that are in Pacific regions, and then they can actually get to that networking point. So I've been working on the back end with how I can sort of, I guess, similar to the Welcome to Australia app, but it's where if you are in Darwin or you are in a rural area, who are those women around you that can support you that are in the entrepreneurial space? Because it's a different space to, as you know, corporates and everything else. So that's what we've been working on now. We noticed that a lot of the time, you know, if they were in Sydney, a lot of the women wanted to catch up with other Indigenous women in Sydney to see, you know, what are you doing? What drives you? What's exciting? What's happening here? And we formed such an incredible community, but it tends to be on a sort of a Facebook level. And, you know, it needs to be much bigger. It needs to be more accessible. We need to be able to shoot it out there and say, hey, you know, who's in Sydney? I'm here for 3 days. Let's do it. Let's get 10 of us together. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. Really cool. Really cool. Awesome. Jennifer, how about you? What's next for you with Echo World?
Unmute my mic. Can I just say, I think I'm really special till I get into crowds like this, and then I think... Anyway, thank you so much. Kylie, maybe the old Australians and the new Australians should get together on their tech. You might be able to help each other out.
I actually just put a big star beside your name of the person that can help.
Yeah. So, which probably speaks to my biggest downfall is not so much entrepreneurship as networking. I'm obsessed with it. If I think someone can help someone, I can't help myself. So, the backbone of EchoScore and the world I live in is not reinventing anything, actually. So I'm actually obsessed with waste, and I'm talking about wasting anything: time, money, data, anything. And reinventing the wheel or doing something again that's already being done just seems like a waste of a better life that could be lived somewhere else. So, yeah, that's why I'm obsessed with putting people together. But, and I might say, sorry, as far as apps go, there's a woman in Philadelphia who has a food rescue app that I think could solve a battery problem here in Australia, a battery collection problem here in Australia, and I'm putting them together. So I think so that's one of the things that we do. That's more Echo World. EchoScore itself, the big job there is to get it off Echo World, because Echo World is a community, but EchoScore is a measure, and they're two quite different things. Echo World itself is Australian as well, and to take it beyond Australia is a whole other story. The score itself, though, as we well know, we're a very small world, and so are the products within it. You know, I mean, things are, even to a molecular level, things are made of certain stuff, and to be able to define what a product is made of is quite a straightforward thing, really, particularly when you've got an algorithm, a bit of AI, bit of automation and some blockchain, you're off. So that's our next job, is to get the trial finished and off Echo World and onto a standalone platform of its own, which sounds, it's actually very complicated doing simple things, I have discovered. But I think but I've got a great impetus, actually, which I might have been slowed by COVID because we lost a big funding stream we had. But the score is our monetisation strategy as well, because it's a licensing model. And essentially it allows any product then to be scored anywhere, or from a social perspective, smaller micro and small businesses, which of course are my heart, are we can allow them to use it for free, but bigger businesses potentially pay for it. So there's a whole strategy behind it, but essentially it's the licensing model.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome, thank you. Jannat, what's next for you?
Straight after this, the kids are home. No, I'm just joking. But they are home. So what's next for me is a different conversation to what's next for Smart Cities Council. So we'll focus on Smart Cities Council Australia and New Zealand. And I only speak from the perspective of the New Zealand sort of arm of it. So now that I'm, in this role, and I quite like the approach of Smart Cities Council around livability, and that's a first principle: livability, workability, and sustainability. And actually, on that note, this might be of interest to some of you that actually today, the first ever report has been released by, I think it was a collaboration between 4 or 5 organisations, including the Sustainable Business Council of New Zealand and the Sustainable Business Network. But they released a report. It was launched today, so I don't think it's available on any websites at the moment. But they did a survey of sustainability professionals and found that actually one of the key findings, and there was a number of them, was that the females aged between 26 and 45 dominated the sustainability profession, and most identified with New Zealand ethnicity. So I just thought that was like, bang, found that. And I thought, I'll just put that in here. So I'll be looking up that report and probably we'll put it out on LinkedIn. But what's next is to continue that conversation. So like I said, before we had COVID, we'd pull those 3 sort of aspects together: the tech sector, the demand side with the councils, and then academia. And I'm quite a big collaborator. I'm if someone had to describe me, they'd say I'm a connector and a collaborator, similar to Jennifer. So I'm really keen to do that connection. And Smart Cities Council's got a platform called Project Activator, which is like every city in the world, and a number of them are members of the council, for example, can put on this platform, and whether they want to hide it or whether they want to share it with just their sort of colleagues, or whether they want to share it within just their state or whatever, but however much they want to share it. But it's all their smart cities projects and at the various stages that they're at. So that's it's a powerful tool, because going back to Jennifer's point around waste and not reinventing wheels, I'm really big. That's why I do the connecting and the collaborating, is why when someone else has already done it, or they're already thinking it, or they've already failed, and go and talk to them. And so that's quite powerful. And it's probably another sort of big tick for why I'm part of Smart Cities Council. But this activator platform is just powerful. So I could be sitting in Hamilton putting on just the Smart Hamilton projects just for the Smart Hamilton team, and then share that out. Or I could just go and browse cities from around the world and see what they're doing, how much they're investing, what technology platforms are they using, how many people are involved, what's the decision-making process, and all that. So I'm quite keen to support connecting with that platform. The collaboration, again, getting those 3 sort of organisations together. So when I'm not Smart Cities Council Australia and New Zealand and the Smart Cities Advisor for Hamilton City Council, I'm also on the Executive Council of New Zealand IoT Alliance. And so for smart cities, you have the sensor network, and then you have the Internet of Things. And as I mentioned, the Centre for Data Leadership, I'm the New Zealand lead. So I'm trying to get this collaboration going there as well, so that we're, again, not reinventing wheels, and we're like in sync around those principles for why, the why principles. The other important thing for me, so sort of that connecting and continuing with that collaboration, the next one after that, or as part of that, is the data. So that conversation around the data and what I talked about around purpose and privacy and security, ethics and governance of data. So, but the most important thing, and this goes back to amazing stuff that Kylie is doing. Kylie, I actually want to move to that town, by the way. Like that's 100 kilometers out of that city. As soon as you said that, I'm like, I want to go there. Can I go there?
Yeah, come visit anytime.
But it's just a dream, because and I like that you're making, and this is what I often say about innovation. So there's innovation, and innovation's changing, something that's currently happening, or inventing a new thing and moving us from point A to point B or whatever. And it's but what tends to happen is it's always the same people doing the innovating. So I need to, I focus quite a lot on inclusive, so ensuring that innovation is inclusive. And I remember I was at an event last year, and they were talking about innovation precincts and the fact that we should set up an innovation precinct in Hamilton, and that's actually a good idea for most cities. And so you get the tech sector to fund it, and you have this little precinct, and people can come and do innovation there. And I said, that's probably not accessible for everyone. You know, like you're putting it already in the business, in the CBD amongst corporates, like automatically you're almost like this gate's gone up going, well, only people here can come into this space. So so that would be my other thing. So what's next is that connecting, encouraging collaboration, the conversation around data, and then ensuring that whatever we're doing in the smart city space is inclusive and accessible. So there's a difference between being inclusive and actually having access to, you know, to be able to participate in that inclusiveness. So an example of that, I was involved in something totally non-tech related recently, and there was a word in there and it said the purpose of this organization would be to enable the diverse communities to participate to their ability, or something like that, the terminology was. And I said, automatically, you're not even worried, you know, you're putting that to their ability means that some of them can't access it right now. So are you really dealing to why they can't access it and taking those barriers away? Because the minute you say to their ability, you're limiting them to just currently what their environment is. And you actually got to get in there and go, you know, we value your input. We're inclusive this way, and we're actually going to support you to participate. So,
yeah, amazing. We've got 3 minutes left, and I've got to jump into the next session. So, Rinku, very quickly, what's next for you?
I'll be very quick. We go through pillars. We have 3 pillars in our organization: awareness, acquisition, and innovation. And all the work that we do, we drive it towards these 3 pillars with one key objective. And the key objective is to serve new Australians to the best of our ability. So in those 3 pillars, in awareness, I'm really pleased that we have actually partnered up with one of the largest advertising agencies in Australia in the multicultural space. So we are driving quite a lot of work, and it will start happening from 1st of July in awareness and acquisition. And innovation, we are driving the first generation entrepreneur program that we are looking at starting the first batch of it towards the end of this year. So really, those are the key pillars. Everything else, which are our stats and the number of people we want to help and everything else, falls within those pillars. Yeah, so basically just scale it up.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for being here today and being part of this incredible conversation. It's so inspiring to see the many different ways that women are changing the world, and the 4 of you are such beautiful examples of that, of what's possible when we work together and use tech to enable change. Up next, we've got a keynote from Leanne Kemp, Queensland's Chief Entrepreneur. There's a workshop with Michelle Bowditch on tips and tricks for using tech to organise your life and your business. And I'm interviewing an investor, Stella, and talking to her about investing, funding and pitching for female founders. So stay with us. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in. We've got 3 sessions happening next, so jump into one of those and keep enjoying. And thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Lise. Bye. Bye, all.
Bye.